Good evening, everyone. We're going to start in just a moment, so if you'd come in and grab a seat, that would be great. My name is Dan Haley. I'm the publisher of the Forest Park Review, and on behalf of the Review and our long-time partners of the Chamber of Commerce and Lori Kokinis, the Executive Director, thanks very, very much for being here. I want to thank District 91, which has also been our longtime host for these election year forums. They are gracious and welcoming and very helpful. Want to note one of my colleagues in the back here, Jessica McKinnon, who is our election coordinator for the Review and our other newspapers within Growing Community Media. And so as we are getting ready to launch our online digital guide in the next couple days and print coverage, Jessica is the person who has made that happen, along with several other of our colleagues. John Nichols is recording the proceedings, and the recording will be on the forestparkreview.com website in the next few days. Next couple of days. There are other people who are also recording and or streaming, and that's great, and we welcome your participation. We've been doing this a long time, 42 years since Growing Community Media got started in Oak Park. And something I have said at any of these events that I have the honor of moderating is that as a newspaper, local newspaper, we are grateful to our neighbors who put themselves forward as candidates. This is hard duty. And in all of these years that we've done this, there have been a handful of times where I have sat across the table and listened to people and had some suspicion of their motives. Too much ego or something driving them. Almost always, universally almost, these are sincere and good people, and we are lucky to have competitive elections. So thanks to each of the candidates for being with us tonight. Let me tell you a little bit about the format.
Is there any way we can get more seats?
I don't know the answer to that. We got a seat up here. Anyone else got seats here? We got some seats around and about. Whether we can add more chairs, we'll find out. So we are dividing this event into two parts. First, we are going to talk with the two candidates for mayor. That's going to be the first hour, 6:30 to 7:30. We're going to take a short break and then come back with the candidates for commissioner. We are, two of our colleagues, Jessica, who I mentioned, our old friend Lori Kokinis, they are passing out index cards for you to write down your questions. Most all of the questions tonight will come from you. So please write it down, raise your hand, they'll be collected. Lori and Jessica are going to kind of sort through them and look for duplicates and so on, and then they'll hand them up to me. The two candidates for mayor are going to come up to the podium in just a moment. They each will have 5 minutes, up to 5 minutes, to give some opening comments. They will then go up on the stage, and we will start asking questions through till 7:30. Candidates in the room, we should have mentioned this to you sooner. The microphones, there is a button, a red button. You need to press that button for your microphone to go live. And when you are done answering, you should turn that off. Mute yourself, just like on Zoom. We are timing the opening remarks for both the mayoral candidates and later shorter opening remarks for the commissioner candidates. That's the only thing that's going to be timed. Beyond that, this is going to be more of a conversation. And I know that our candidates will be respectful in trying to make sure that everyone gets pretty much a fair chance to speak. There are more chairs coming in the room. If people could raise their hands again right now, if there's an open chair near them. So we got at least a dozen open chairs. You may not be able to sit with your special friend, but do come on in and sit down. We are asking that you also turn off your phones so we're not getting that interruption or distraction. So with that, I am going to ask in order that was chosen by lot, John Doss is the first speaker, and he'll be followed by Rory Hoskins, and if they could come forward.
First of all, I'd like to give a big thanks to the Forest Park Review and the Chamber of Commerce for co-sponsoring, and to District 91 for hosting this event. Please join me in giving them a round of applause, please. To all of you, your commitment to our democratic process, a testament to the quality of people that live in Forest Park, and it shows how much you care. I want everyone here to know I share this care for Forest Park as well. A little closer. Yep, you got it, sorry. And so let me start this over again. To all you, your commitment to our democratic process is a testament to the quality of people that live in Forest Park, and it shows how much you care. I want everybody here to know I share that care for Forest Park as well. And so I would like to personally welcome you here tonight. I understand that everybody in the crowd has my bio. I hope you'll take the time and have had the opportunity to read it, if you haven't already. But I'm going to jump in right in here what I'm talking about tonight. I understand our mayor has repeatedly said the village of Forest Park is not in the business of parks, and that's okay. It's a fine position to have if you're only interested in half the infrastructure that makes our town a great place to live. I am existing elected president of the Park Board of Forest Park, a position I've held for 4 separate occasions through my 16 years as a commissioner. I would ask anyone who is voting in this election to look around this village and identify the things that they believe have been improvements or genuine benefits residents who vote, pay taxes, and live here. While Madison Street goes season over season without planner beautification and less care paid to even the simplest maintenance routines, the Park District has built your Ruse Recreation Center. While the Alpine lot sits vacant on Van Buren with only the mayor's most trusted companions to weigh in on its future, the Park District purchased the Oak Leaf Pines building, a vacant eyesore, a detriment to both our village's beauty and safety. Soon that land will be developed by the Park District into another facility that will offer services and benefits to all the voters in the village. While Roosevelt Road sees vacancies continue to stack up, including large plots of land and massive big box locations, your Park District underwent a splash pad beautification project to improve our amazing community pool even further. In 2021, under Mayor Hoskins' leadership, Village Hall proved it couldn't fund the management of the 4 pocket parks. The Park District now leases these pocket parks from the village and is securing state grant funding upwards of $1 million to pursue park improvement and beautification throughout the entire village. In fact, I can almost say with certainty, if any village resident were to look around the village of Forest Park and identify something they saw to be an improvement, it would likely have been done by the Park District, not your current mayor. Forest Park draws visitors and their out-of-village dollars to our business districts throughout amenities and events that make Forest Park a destination. Our amazing parks, the best community pool in the Western Burbs, 16-inch softball games, a national tournament, the 16-inch Softball Hall of Fame, the 4th of July celebration, an immaculate soccer field, tennis courts, and a skate park are just some of the amenities and events you have counted on the Park District year after year. Soon we'll be able to add a new facility at the Oak Leaf Lounge. I want to bring the leadership I have performed at the Park District to this great village. When I say I want to put the park back into Forest Park, I do not mean or intend to attempt to merge these two. What I mean that in my 16 years of experience effectively leading and managing the park district of the Village of Forest Park proves the Village Hall has a lot to learn about how to efficiently, effectively manage a municipality. And I believe that I'm the right person to help improve the knowledge and lead our village to ensure that we remain a safe, beautiful, and charming small town for everyone who lives here. Thank you so much.
And now, Rory Hoskins.
Good evening. My name is Rory Hoskins. It's been my privilege to serve as mayor in the Village of Forest Park for the last 4 years. I want to thank the Forest Park Review and the Forest Park Chamber of Commerce for holding this forum tonight. I'm going to talk briefly about what I consider to be some wins that the village has experienced under the time that I've served as mayor. In May of 2019, the village was awarded a $750,000 grant from the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity to demolish 4 buildings that were dilapidated and hazardous that surrounded the Altenheim Senior Living Facility. This was an economic development grant. This grant was intended to spur job creation, and it was conditioned on the village undertaking some sort of transit-oriented development. It was not a parks grant. It was not given to the village for the purpose of creating open space. Now, of all the people who are serving today, none of us anticipated that the COVID pandemic would overlay our service to the village. But Forest Park has emerged from COVID stronger than before. When COVID hit in 2020 in March, the village worked very closely with the Forest Park Chamber of Commerce to communicate our expectations with respect to the closure orders of non-essential businesses. We made sure that the village, its residents, and the businesses knew Village Hall's expectations during the pandemic. By April, we had testing available at Village Hall. By April, we had purchased large amounts of masks and other protective equipment. In May, during the turbulent times that overtook our community, Forest Park was not looted. Fast forward to 2021, when vaccines were readily available, we worked with our state, county, and federal partners and established a COVID testing facility right here in Forest Park along Roosevelt Road at the old hobo space. Anyone in Forest Park who wanted a vaccine could easily get a vaccine. So let's talk a little bit about public safety. Forest Park has installed an extensive network of surveillance cameras to keep you safe as an investigative tool along Roosevelt Road, along Des Plaines, along Madison, and along Harlem. These cameras are interoperable with neighboring communities' law enforcement as well as state police. Let's talk a little bit about economic development. There are many new businesses along Madison Street. There are many new businesses along Harlem. Recently, Hawk Auto notified the village that they wanted to acquire the vacant Gleason Dodge dealership at the corner of Roosevelt and Des Plaines. That eyesore has sat vacant since probably 2004. And Hawk Auto told us that they intend to invest $8 million to build a state-of-the-art dealership to market exclusively cheap brand electric vehicles. Now, given the state and federal tax incentives available to encourage the purchase of electric vehicles, this is going to mean very significant revenue for the village. We recently approved a cannabis dispensary. This is going to bring revenue to the village. We are now working with the owners of the Forest Park Mall to develop the former hobo space into a year-round indoor sporting complex. This is going to be a significant improvement along Roosevelt Road. They are studying how to raise the roof. They want to build hockey rinks and concessions and locker rooms. This is going to be a real significant improvement to Roosevelt Road. This past October, The village embraced the concept of pay equity. Until recently, all of our women department heads, despite their years of experience and their expertise, they were limited to 5-figure salaries. As a result of this council's bold action, these women now make salaries on par with their male counterparts. We've brought in other grants. Forest Park got $725,000 under the bipartisan infrastructure law at the federal level. We brought in another $1.5 million in grants and assorted state grants. And we recently secured grants to install EV charging stations in Forest Park. On the other side, I'll talk about some of my second-term goals. And by the way, the splash pad doesn't work.
So if the two mayoral candidates would find their way up the stairs through the side doors, we'll get going with some questions. And I would remind you to press the button to turn on your microphones when you are speaking. We're continuing to collect questions and sort questions out. So by all means, offer them up. We got a few in the front row, Jessica. All right, gentlemen, thank you for being here. Thanks for the opening statements. Let's start by talking about citizen commissions in Forest Park. Which is a process that has kind of come back to life, it feels like, in the last several years. More active commissions on different, more specialized topics. What is the value of those commissions? What expertise do they bring? Where do they, how much influence should they have with village council eventual decisions? Mr. Doss, you want to start?
Sure. So commissions in this town, they are so important, in my opinion. I know that I was involved with the Traffic and Safety Committee as the Director of Public Works, also with the Park Recreation Department, and I think they bring a lot of value to the village. I think we should continue to use them. I think we need to add a couple more, maybe in a green commission, and I'm all for them. They should also have a little bit more say in what happens in the village. When they bring this stuff forward, a lot of times it just disappears. Nothing's followed through. Lately, I've seen some stuff followed through, but yeah, it's definitely very important, and I think we should be using them more often than we do.
Mr. Hoskins.
Thank you for the question. I began my service in Forest Park as an appointee to the Traffic and Safety Commission. Soon after being appointed to that commission in 2006, I was encouraged to run for village commissioner. So I see these boards and commissions, they are advisory boards and commissions, but I see these commissions as entryways for people to get more involved in the village, possibly a training ground for people to eventually run for office in the village, whether it's village commissioner or some other role. We have a fire pension board, and I found a young guy who grew up in Forest Park and who was trained as an actuary. So I was happy to appoint this young actuary in his 30s to serve on the fire pension board. And I hope that at some point he'll get a little bit more involved in the village and maybe consider running for office one day. We have a police pension board that is, it's a 3-member board. And they are working with us to address some of the police and fire pension funding issues. Both are underfunded, but because we have people who actually have expertise in their role, one of the appointees to the police pension board is a CPA, a Marine, a consultant, and he's very invested in his work. My other appointee to the police pension board, she's here. She works in purchasing for CTA. But what I've seen is that their involvement on these boards, it seems to have them a little bit more vested in the village. We also have a Sustainability Commission. The Sustainability Commission is working closely with C4. C4 is the Cross Community Climate Collaborative that we're part of, along with Oak Park, River Forest, and about 8 other communities, looking to address sustainability issues and adopt sustainable practices. We're using our scale as a number of villages combined to find solutions. This is fairly new, but these various boards, last night the village actually created a mental health board. We want to look at bringing more resources to Forest Park. We want to look at having a mental health fair. And so we meet all the time people who have incredible expertise in their fields throughout Forest Park. Just the other day, I was in front of Village Hall, and I saw a woman pushing a stroller. I happened to engage her in conversation, and it turns out she has, some PhD and all these eminent qualifications, and I hope we can engage her to serve on the new mental health board. There are other mental health providers, mental health professionals in town who want to serve. So these boards give people a way to get involved and to serve and contribute to the betterment of the community.
One of the questions that we asked in our review questionnaire to all the candidates, I think we ask it every 4 years, and I've kind of come to see it as the third rail of local government, and that is home rule. 20 years ago, home rule was put on the ballot because it has to be passed by referendum in a town the size of Forest Park, and it went down badly. Hasn't really been talked about much since. I'm struck by your responses, by the responses of most of the commissioner candidates, which seem pretty open to the idea of bringing home rule back, or at least seriously considering it. Mr. Doss?
So home rule, if there's some traction to it, which I see there is, I'd be all for having a conversation with constituents to see if it's something we can move forward with. If I'm not mistaken, I think it has to come not from the board, from a resident. I think has to spur this on. But it definitely gives us more ability to raise taxes, gas taxes, fuel taxes. We can also be stringent on our building codes, zoning codes. That's all stuff that's very important to this village. So that's the reason I would like to entertain it, but it would only be if it was a response from the community saying they would be interested in pursuing it.
Why do you think there's sometimes opposition from residents to it? There's some sort of a fear of home rule. Why do you think that is?
I think it's trust. I think you have to trust the mayor and the commissioners. If you have the trust in them, you give them the control. So I think it's all a trust issue.
Okay. Mr. Hoskins, home rule?
I would support a referendum on home rule, yes.
And why?
We're limited by the fact that we have, as a non-home rule government, we have limitations. We have limitations on how we can raise revenue, and the other things, John was correct. Every year, every legislative session, the West Central Municipal Conference that we're part of introduces legislation to grant home rule powers to communities as small as, I believe, 10,000. We're 14,000. I think it's 25,000 is the threshold currently. But a town our size, with the kind of challenges we have and the complexities, home rule would probably allow our government to work a little bit more effectively.
Same question I asked Mr. Doss. Why do you think there is sometimes worry over home rule?
Well, like you pointed out earlier, that was a long time ago.
20 years or so.
Yeah. I would like to see that a referendum on home rule.
Okay. Next question is related to the Altenheim property. Another story that has unfolded for 20 years. And there is now a commission that is coming toward conclusions, recommendations that will come to the Village Council fairly soon. Mr. Doss, you've got a little bit of an interesting perspective because of your role at the Park District. where the park district has over time said we're not able, interested, and now to me it feels like the door is open a titch, that the park district may be open on some basis to playing a role in developing, managing the property. Why don't we start there? Because someone's going to have to develop and manage this property, the recreational pieces of it.
So I can speak for the park board. The park is not ready to come to the table. We have a bunch of projects that we're in the middle of. Haven't even decided what we're gonna do with the Pines yet. I know that what Director Ivanelli was talking about at the meeting was if the village is gonna build a park there, or whoever does, the park district, like the pocket parks, would be willing to take over and maintain what they build. We have no interest in coming to the table and purchasing, helping fund, just because we have so much going on. In 5 years, that's where we left the door. In 5, 6 years, when we're done with some of these projects, could there be another conversation? Absolutely. As of right now, we have no interest. But like I said, we would maintain it if it was built.
So what is your view? This is an 11-acre green space. What is your view on how the future split of that land ought to be between leaving open space and some development options? How much, what sort of development options might you think appropriate?
Let me just start by saying I always think green is better, so the more green, the better to me. That being said, I understand we cannot do 100% of a park, so I'd be willing to look at some of these boards. First of all, I'd like to say the two committees they put together, the old DeFebo committee and the new one they have now, the work they've done has been impeccable. It's been outstanding. The hard work, the hours. My only concern is the rush into this. Now that we own it after 20-some years, why are we making a decision a month before an election when you could have 3 or 4 new elected officials? That's my only concern. I'd let it play out and then let, if there is new officials, talk about it. I also want to see a lot more public comment and public input on this, not just the select few. Once we get these committees together, the public should have a say-so. And right now, I don't think that's happening.
Mr. Hoskins on Altenheim, there does feel as if during your term until the last year, and certainly in the years before that under Mayor Calderon, that there was a lack of planning on what should happen to that land, and some resistance to public participation in that process. What's your view on, and not just spend too much time looking backwards, but why did this take so long? And what do you think should happen next? How much of this land do you think should remain open?
So let's look back just a little bit, please. The village purchased the Altenheim land before I was ever a commissioner. I became a commissioner in 2007. I want to say in I think it was 2013, Steve Glinke really suggested that I take a close look at the Altenheim. So I actually went in the buildings, and we saw that it looked like people had been living there, and the paper documented that. And so, at different times they were going to sell it to the YMCA, or some school wanted to buy it for a football stadium. But as a candidate, I made, the Altenheim part of my platform. I said I would make that a priority to get funding to take down those buildings. And right after I got elected, but before I was installed as mayor, I went to Springfield and we talked. Commissioner Vogt went with me. We talked to several legislators, and they ended up giving us the $750,000 grant that I referenced earlier. But it hasn't moved fast. We were awarded the grant in May of 2019. Then COVID hit, and all these grants were up in the air. But we finally signed an intergovernmental agreement in December of 2020. And like I said, that conditioned the village to undertake some kind of development. And what I've always said is that I would like to see a maximum of 3 acres sold to a developer, because the proceeds could go towards funding pensions.
So
Our
you're saying that if some portion is sold off, you would specifically set that money aside for pensions?
I would want to see the bulk of it go towards pensions.
Okay.
And let me also say something, we're not rushing. I asked 2 of our commissioners to work with staff and really take a look at the Altenheim. So that was Commissioner Jessica Vogt and Commissioner Maria Maxam. They worked with staff. They conceived this new Altenheim committee, 12 individuals. These 2 commissioners and Steve Glinke interviewed about 20 or so people, maybe more than 20, I don't remember the exact number. And they selected 12, and they recommended those 12 to me for appointment. That's something the village had never done. Under our system, under the commission system of government, the mayor has appointment power. But I delegated that role to 2 commissioners, and they looked at a broad cross-section of Forest Park residents. They found very talented individuals, and they've held a number of meetings. All those meetings have been consistent with the Open Meetings Act, and there's been quite a bit of citizen input. And even though they may make a recommendation to the council soon, no one said we're going to act on that. Nothing's going to happen before the election. That's just not going to happen. But we did let them, or ask them, to do the public engagement function and get input on what should go there.
So if there's not going to be a decision before the election, when do you expect there will be some decisive action?
Let's see how the election shakes out.
Okay, fair enough. In your current roles, and I think we're talking here about as mayor and probably in public works, what have you done to establish hiring standards to bring the best possible employees to the village? Mr. Hoskins.
We really don't have that many hires to make. I had the opportunity to hire an assistant, and I did that as a very inexperienced mayor. And I interviewed a person, and she was ultimately replaced. But in terms of standards, we post everything publicly. We generally let department heads do the interviews. I don't think commissioners get too involved in the interviews. I certainly have never weighed in on hires other than my personal assistant. Oh, we did hire the village administrator. I take that back. But one thing we did do is we put in a policy to discourage department heads from hiring their children. That's something that we did do shortly after I became mayor.
To discourage or to not allow?
To discourage. We put in an anti-nepotism policy, basically, Dan.
Mr. Doss, your time at Public Works and hiring practices?
I can tell you at Public Works, when I was a director for 13 years, I had very little say-so in who I hired. I did hire my son. I know that's where that's coming from. That's where the nepotism is. But I had the okay from the village mayor, and both of my commissioners that were head of my department both gave me the okay. There was no nepotism rule. He was a qualified person that came from summer help, and that's how we were hiring back then. So that's how the hiring process came with my son, just so everybody knows. Other than that, I've always had commissioners involved in all my interviewing and hiring process. It was never just my decision ever in 13 years, that I can tell you. And as far as the park goes, I was on the committee with Matt Walsh when we did our search for our new executive director. So we do extensive background checks, we do extensive advertising, so it's just our standard practice at hiring.
So that could lead to another question about the role of commissioners in departments. You ran Public Works for 13 years. You're saying all hiring decisions also involve a designated commissioner. So this is under the commission form of government where an elected official is assigned to a department. Is that wise? Is that a good system?
So as far as the commission form of government, when I worked as a director, I never felt the pressure from a commissioner. They never told me what needed to be done. They had absolutely the greatest ideas. They're the first line of contact from residents, so they should get all resident concerns and they should hand them to the village administrator. The village administrator should be handing out daily duties. When I was there, I answered to Tim Gillian, and it worked totally fine for me, 100%. And commissioners also have ideas, they should be involved. But the day-to-day should be run between the director and the administrator.
Mr. Hoskins.
I just wanted to add, when I was a commissioner, I did encourage the hiring of people who were bilingual. I found that, we live in an area that has a lot of Spanish speakers, and we didn't have anyone in Village Hall who spoke Spanish at the time. And so on one occasion, I did strongly encourage the clerk to hire a Spanish speaker.
Okay, this is a question we get every town we cover. Backyard chickens. In favor? 2 to 4 backyard chickens.
I'm in favor.
How come? Real quick, but how come? Why, this is just a simple thing for you?
Yeah, I think it's time. Why not? Give me a reason why we shouldn't, and then we'll discuss it. As my opinion, I think there's not a problem.
Okay. Mr. Hoskins?
I really don't have a strong feeling about it. If my colleagues on the council asked me to put forward an ordinance allowing chickens, I would probably support that.
Okay. The Army site on Roosevelt Road, which I think was previously a Navy site, it is now an empty site. The village, I think this started under Mayor Calderon with an active effort to try to control or influence the future development of what is, I think, 6 acres of land on a major street. Last year, Mr. Hoskins, you came forward with a plan to get into what was certainly a convoluted bidding process put forward by the Pentagon to try to get control of that site. But you also came up with this idea that this should become the next municipal headquarters. Where did that idea come from? How did that idea get vetted? What would happen to the existing village-owned properties? And are you still actively in favor of relocating village services to that piece of land if you were able to control it?
What I saw was an opportunity to possibly acquire the property. We really didn't have a thought-out plan in place. Over the last 3 years, on many occasions, people have remarked about the size of Village Hall. The clerk's office is fairly confined. We have an office for 4 commissioners that is really suited towards maybe 1 or 2 people. The police side of Village Hall is extremely compact. They don't have sufficient training room. So the Army base, 6.5 acres, I think it's about 90,000 square feet, maybe 70,000 square feet.
In an existing building?
An existing building. It's much more space than we have today. So even if the village had acquired it, I certainly didn't expect Village Hall to move over quickly. There's a lot of unknowns about that property. So at this point, I won't go around saying that we should get it for a Village Hall. At some point, we may outgrow Village Hall, and Village Hall has some other deficiencies. Right now, we're fixing the quarters for our fire department. They have a leaky roof. We've just decided to spend money to fix that roof. They don't have sufficient quarters. But it's also very expensive to undertake a new Village Hall. Right?
So at this point, you are saying you're kind of pulling that idea back, but you're still interested potentially in the village being able to control the property.
I'm interested in the village controlling the property. It's not my top priority, but we have such valuable land here. I go around saying, kind of serious, kind of jokingly all the time, that Forest Park has some of the most valuable land in Cook County. We're 20 minutes from either airport. We have 2 train lines that come here. This really is valuable real estate as far as the Chicagoland region goes. So if we have the opportunity to control 6.5 acres, then I think we should look at that very seriously.
Okay.
But we can also look at controlling it and then having a private sector partner. You know, maybe it could be housing. I don't know. It's not my top priority today.
Okay. Mr. Doss, in your questionnaire, you said you didn't believe Forest Park has the financial capacity right now to relocate municipal functions. Is that accurate? And what do you think should be the village's goal with that property?
So I don't think I ever said that I didn't want to move Village Hall. I think 100% it's time to start looking to build a new Village Hall, no matter where it is.
Okay.
I did say in a couple talks I've had that our CTA lot, 13A and B at the top of Van Buren, is very underused. To me, that would be a nice place to put the Village Hall. We're talking about security at the L station. The police station across the street brings instant security to the L. I don't know if the people at the Grove are going to enjoy that, but I'm just telling you, to me, that's where I would move the Village Hall. If we had just an open, space and we could put it, that's where I would put it. As far as the Roosevelt Road, I know we've done a study years ago under, I think, the Calderon regime, and I want to say I'd like to look at that study and see what there were some plans drawn up that we paid for that, pretty much talk about what they wanted to do there. I'd love to bring that up for conversation, but I definitely think we should partner with somebody in the private sector and use our resources to get built what we want there. And it should be some type of retail. We need to bring in some retail there, in my opinion.
Because retail will
Bring in
throw
sales
off sales tax.
Exactly
and so
right.
on. Okay. Let's talk about policing and perceptions of safety and perceptions in beyond Forest Park over how policing and police reform ought to move towards something that is more community focused. Mr. Doss?
I think our police department does an outstanding job. I think it should be a law problem. If you're breaking the law, you should be dealt with. I also think we should bring the police department into the neighborhoods. I'd love to have quarterly meetings each side of town with the police department to hear resident concerns, safety concerns from business owners. And we can do it, 4 times a year. We can pick a school, pick the park where we'd like to, but go to the parts of town and talk about the issues that are in the community.
Mr. Hoskins?
I also think that our police department does an outstanding job. As mayor, the role puts you in charge of the police department. And over the last few years, I've gotten to know many members of our police department a lot better than I knew them before I was mayor. And I see how our police department is evolving. We have younger, very smart, very dedicated police officers. Earlier, I made a reference to a desire to have Spanish-speaking employees in the village because we live in an area that has lots of Spanish speakers. Today, we have probably the most diverse police force we've ever had. We have a deputy chief who's Chinese American. Until recently, we had an Arab-speaking police officer, but he took a job with U.S. Customs. We have police officers who speak Polish, more than one. I think we have about 3 or 4 Spanish speakers. And then in terms of community engagement, the ability to speak to people is the ability to engage. When people come to Forest Park in distress and don't speak English, it's much easier for us to find a police officer or some other staff person who can speak to them and help them solve their problem. Also, in terms of community engagement, the current chief is extremely engaged. I mean, he comes to the casket races on his off time. He comes to various community events on his off time. He knows all the business owners because he's been here for over 20 years. He's worked midnights. And so there's a lot that people don't know about our police department. Now, going back to 2020 and that turbulent summer we had, after George Floyd was killed and all protests across the country, we had a community policing meeting at Village Hall. I think you were there, Dan. And I think it was the first time Forest Park had ever done something like that. I wanted to keep it civil. I didn't want residents shouting at police officers. I didn't want them to feel like they were under attack. And we did keep it very civil. and a lot of questions got answered.
Should there be more opportunities like that, or will there be going forward for that direct sort of engagement?
There certainly can be.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is that I just don't think people realize how engaged the members of our police force are in the community. I mean, they're humans. They're around Forest Park all the time, and they're approachable. But we can put formal things in place and create forums for engagement, yes.
We are down to 15 minutes, and we have a ton of great questions. One of them is about cannabis. So there are, as of, I'm not sure I've got this right, as of now, last night there was approval of a dispensary at the old CVS for a portion of that space. There is an application pending for a dispensary at what is now Doc Ryan's. Mr. Doss, do you have, and there's a lot of money, when you talk about throwing off sales tax, there's a lot of money that comes out of cannabis dispensaries. Do you have any concerns about this, or is this all good?
So with the dispensary, the cannabis field itself, I have zero concerns whatsoever. Very safe, very, it's very up and up. I do have a problem with just putting them in without talking to the people of the town. Like, I definitely think it should have been brought up to people.
How would you have liked to have seen that happen?
You could have had a town, their town halls are very easy to throw. I mean, to me, we should have them all the time for anything that's a tough decision. At least to feel how the people, at least to feel out how the residents feel. And with my administration, that's gonna be one of the things I'm gonna look to the residents. It's one of our greatest teams we have built. And we're gonna see what they want with everything I do. So they'll be involved.
Is 2 the right number, or could there be 3? I mean, every town is looking to land these things.
I don't have an opinion on that. Like I said, it's legal for me to tell a business what should go, if they're gonna sell it, I'm all right with it. I think there's not a problem. I do think community should be involved in the decision, that's all.
Mr. Hoskins, is 2 the right number? Would you be happy to have a dispensary on Roosevelt Road? Limits, concerns, anything to worry about?
I think 2 is an okay number. I don't know if anyone will want to go to Roosevelt Road because parking's an issue. But in terms of public engagement and community input, shortly after I became mayor in 2019, we held 2 community meetings to address cannabis because the state was just starting to allow recreational cannabis. I got a call from someone I know who's a Springfield veteran, and he just said, Rory, these cannabis sales are going to bring a lot of revenue to villages like Forest Park. You would better get your village prepared to one day accept a cannabis dispensary organization. So we held town halls at the community center, and we had a company called Karuna Ventures. Again, the Forest Park Review covered these meetings. And I think at each meeting, they probably had at least 20, maybe 30 people. I'm not sure exactly how many, but they may have been 2-hour-long meetings. People had a chance to ask all their questions. I mean, some of the questions were, people had concerns. And some of the questions indicated that people obviously were not predisposed to agreeing to cannabis. But the way Mike Cardozo from Karuna addressed the audience and answered all their questions, we didn't see any real outcry until the village established zoning, and we've been waiting for the opportunity to host a dispensary because it does bring a lot of revenue. And so 2 would be a great number. But market forces will determine whether or not someone comes to Roosevelt Road or decides to seek another cannabis.
So the town hall you held 2 years ago was a bit of a generic, there wasn't a specific location. Mr. Doss, I'm hearing you say, oh, now that there are specific locations, what about the people in a 500-foot radius? Is that something that should have happened more directly?
People are going to disagree. Recreational cannabis has been around for 3 years now, and we've seen a lot of improvement in how these dispensaries are run. There are no more long lines. They are very secure. And so when we had residents last night telling us that they had concerns about crime, you know, CVS had a lot of crime because they served liquor there. They sold liquor is what I meant to say. And they had 2 people working in CVS, and they were under orders not to engage shoplifters. So if someone comes off of the Green Line or from wherever and decides to steal a bottle of Jack Daniels and they run out, they call a police report. That's what they're trained to do. But these dispensing organizations are so secure. I don't think that they're going to be detrimental to the area.
So if Doc Ryan's does become a dispensary, that's not done yet, but it's certainly moving toward that, that will eliminate another liquor license on Madison Street? And what is your view, in your view, certainly there have been a gradual but intentional reduction in the number of bars on Madison. Is that good? Is that, you know, the market should dictate? Mr. Doss?
You know, the bars have been on the street for a long time. I think there's a place for them. But I do think that we need to move in another direction when it comes to restaurants, bars, right? We should be moving where bars have restaurants in them. The ones that are there are totally fine. But anything new, in my opinion, should have a restaurant involved.
Mr. Hoskins?
So the answer to the first question, if they close on the property and they actually, you know, take ownership, then yes, a bar license will go away. But that hasn't happened yet. And for a long time, the village has been moving towards more restaurants and fewer bars. Doc Ryan's itself is a large bar. It's often not really full. We've had some law enforcement incidents there over the last few years. During COVID, there were some large disturbances at Doc Ryan's. And so I would not be sorry to see it go and become a dispensary. It would be a lot more of a secure location if it becomes a dispensary. And also, Dan, the character of the community has changed, right? People are spending a lot of money on these homes right off of Madison Street. So, you know, our community is simply evolving. And so maybe bigger bars go away and we have nicer restaurants and smaller bars.
So it's a nonpartisan election, but we have a question here asking each of you to describe your political philosophy. And I would ask, the question I've been thinking about is, do you see yourselves as having some sort of kind of core constituency within Forest Park, or not particularly? So could you describe your political philosophy broadly? And do you think you have a core constituency, Mr. Hoskins?
So we certainly run for village office on a nonpartisan basis. But everyone who knows me knows that I've been active in the Democratic Party. At one point, I was president of the Proviso Township Democratic Organization, and in 2020, I was a Biden delegate. That was an elected role. I was a Biden delegate. So I'm a Democrat, and do I have a core constituency in Forest Park? I've been elected with broad majorities here, right? So maybe my core constituency are the soccer parents, or the people who send their kids to public schools, or the people who pay taxes. Those are all my constituencies.
Mr. Doss.
So I can honestly say that I'm nonpartisan. I vote issues and I vote policy. That being said, my constituents are everybody here, all the paying taxpayers, and everybody that visits our beautiful parks. I mean, that's where I shine, so.
Okay. We're down to about 5 minutes. Red light cameras, speed cameras. Mr. Doss.
I'm for speed cameras, red light cameras. I don't really have an opinion for.
And what's the upside of speed cameras?
I'm sorry?
What's the upside of speed cameras?
Safety. I'm all about safety, so.
Okay. Mr. Haskins.
Speed cameras are acceptable. Red light cameras, maybe they have a deterrent effect as well. I'm not a huge fan of red light cameras.
We had an early question, Mr. Haskins. I think I've got this right. I read it a bit ago. A question that you had claimed in a mailer, which I have not seen, taking credit for rising property values. And the question was, how does a mayor increase property values?
I don't think I ever said I take credit for it. I said that home values are up. People want to move to Forest Park. There's something about Forest Park that people like. Maybe they see a nice entertainment district. Maybe it's because it's 20 minutes from either airport. Maybe it's because we have nice parks. But the fact is that property values are up. And when I began planning my reelection, and I said this publicly, a good friend of mine who's a data person, he checked with neighboring communities. So Forest Park homes are appraising at higher rates than the neighboring communities. And I've talked to a few realtors recently, and they tell me that Forest Park, there's more demand to move here than they have inventory.
Mr. Doss, different question. I think I heard you in your opening, but if the question came up, explain your slogan.
Again, it's just bringing my successes and our successes from the Park District over to the village.
Okay.
Okay?
All right. Are you going to be at the parade on Saturday? Yep.
Is there a parade?
Is there a parade? All right. Thank you both, and we appreciate your time. We are going to take a break of about 10 minutes, get our